Erev Shabbat Shalom, we're about to enter into the final day or days of Pesach, of Passover. And it's actually very fascinating that every Jewish holiday, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, the last days of Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, Chanukah, Purim, the first days of Passover, Shavuot, each of them we mark by saying the statement of Shechianu v'kimanu v'kiyanu lazman hazeh. Thank God that we arrived at this exact moment, at this moment of time, and we appreciate being here. The final days of Passover are the only holidays in the Jewish calendar that aren't marked by the blessing of Shechianu. And it's a little bit strange, it's a little bit lacking. Technically, that's explained by the fact that it is a continuation of this holiday. But more conceptually, I think what's really happening in Passover is, as we know, on the first night of Passover and the eve of the Seder Eve, at midnight, Pharaoh came to the Jewish people and said, "Get out and go free, leave my country, get out of here. I no longer wish to see you." And the Jewish people started to go, and they went for a day, 2 days, 3 days. And then suddenly Pharaoh said, "Oh my gosh, what have I done?" And he gives chase, on the fourth and the fifth day. On the fourth day, fifth day, and sixth day, he gives chase, and he reaches them on the seventh day. And they are, as the Torah tells us, nevuchim heim ba'aretz. They're confused. Sagar aleim hamidbar. The desert surrounds them, and the sea is on the fourth side, and they don't know how to go, and it looks like it might be the end. And they turn to God, and they call out to God, and they call out to Moses, "Why did you lead us here? What's going on? It's not the way we imagined things would be." And God isn't so kind at first. He says, "Ma titzak alai." Why are you yelling at me? Right? Which is the same response that Moses has. And ultimately he says, Moses turns to Bnei Israel and says, "Hashem yilachem lachem." God will do battle for you, v'atem tacharishun, and you will remain passive. But that's not what happens. God tells Moses, "Speak to the children of Israel and let them go forward into the sea." Going into the sea is no simple feat. The sea is stormy. We're told there's a strong wind the entire night, and the sea is whipped up. What's going to happen? And as we know, because we've peeked ahead, miraculously, the sea splits and the Jewish people go forth onto dry land. And at that moment, our sages say, at that moment, they experience for the first time true freedom. And there are different ways to understand why that was the critical moment. It might be because, in fact, the Egyptian army was swallowed up in the sea, and that's certainly the simple reason. But I want to suggest a perhaps more creative reason that has something to teach us in our own lives. Many of the Hasidic masters suggest the reason that they appreciated freedom at that moment is because they took action. Until then, God brought the plagues, God did this, God did that. At that moment, they achieved their independence through their own action, through having the courage and the commitment and the belief to travel into the unknown, into the sea. In many ways, it's very similar to the rebirth of Israel in its land today. 73 years ago, the United Nations proclaimed that they voted to partition the land on this side of the Jordan into 2 states. And the Jewish people had this great debate. Do we proclaim statehood or not? And ultimately, it was the decision of Ben-Gurion and others, and many, many others were opposed to it, to proclaim statehood, to seize the opportunity, knowing full well that it's going into the great unknown. And that's why we celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut, which parenthetically always comes out, Hey Iyar, always comes out on the same day of the week as the 7th day of Passover. We celebrate it when we chose to declare the state of Israel being founded, not back on the 29th of November when the UN voted to let us go free, as it were, not when Pharaoh said, go free, but when we established that reality. My blessing to each of us So we're in a process of going free from our year-long struggles with COVID. And there'll be proclamations and there'll be statements out there. It's safe to do this. It's safe to do that. We can now begin here. We can now begin there, and in different places at different speeds. But my blessing is that we have the courage ourselves to proclaim our own freedom, to proclaim our own statement that we're going free and that we're willing to enter into that unknown. And it's not simple and it's not easy. And it's not a time when we necessarily can sit back and sing Hallel, but it is a time when, having the courage to do that, we will burst out into spontaneous song and appreciation of the newfound freedom. May it be a time of blessing, and for each of us at our own pace to return to a world that is tumu u'u'u, taste and see. The world that God has created is good for each of us. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, Nikhat Geula Shlema. We merit a complete and full redemption from everything that holds us back from all pain and all suffering to a world of goodness and blessing for us, for our families, and ultimately for the entire world. Shabbat Shalom v'Chag Sameach.